You've probably heard a bunch of myths about low top shoes, kind of like this one right here, that have absolutely zero basis in reality. There's a whole lot more of them out there that I've seen just almost accepted as fact that are, and like I said, in fact, completely baseless. So let's clear some things up about low tops. All right, starting off with myth number one. Low tops allow more natural movement or just more movement in general. So this myth is particularly interesting because during running, never mind ballistics or jumping, your ankle is subjected to 2 to 3 times your body weight in force as it's dorsiflexing, and it's handling those forces within 100 to 200 milliseconds. That is way too much force over way too short of a time frame for some textile and laces to really do anything with. It's also a great study that I actually quote a lot in my office to patients, showing that mids and highs don't actually restrict any ankle motion. It's just all perceived. Although yeah, you can crank on them, crank on the laces and feel terrible, but the joint motion underneath is still happening. If this weren't the case, you'd see everyone in mids and highs run around like a pirate with a peg leg. Like I said, yeah, you can crank it down and feel like it's constricting your ankle, but the motion is still happening. And think about it. What devices do we use to help augment and control foot motion? Orthotics. Now these at most come up to mid-heel, you never see them, ever, and they do more to control your joint motion than anything. So my point is, it's really what's below, not above, doing the work in terms of mechanics. It's the midsole, the shanks, the molding, the degrees of motion allowed by the heel counter, the angle of the rear foot to the forefoot. Remember, the ankle only allows normal movement in one plane, like up and down. There are joints in the foot that allow normal motion in 3 planes, which a high versus a low is not going to have any bearing on. So if you're looking for more or less restricted motion, because some people want both, look to the midsole, not the uppers. All right, myth number 2. Low tops cause Achilles ruptures. This one has zero basis in reality. And I emphasize reality because there was a study done in 2010 that I think has really influenced some thought on this subject, when in fact it was about as flawed as a study can get when talking about actual human function. But because the results were seemingly shocking, it got a lot of press. Now this study showed that high tops reduced peak tension on the Achilles 9.9% compared to lows. And that sounds like something to take really serious, right? Yeah, it is, because it highlights the differences between live human studies and cadaver or dead limb studies. Because this particular study was done on 2, yes, only 2 cadaver limbs. Cadaver or dead human limbs behave nothing like human limbs. They have zero dynamic muscle activity, just passive inertia. To study something like the Achilles tendon properly, you actually need a functioning muscle tendon unit. Because without dynamic, eccentric, concentric, and isometric muscle contractions, the very forces that make the Achilles so powerful, the study can't reflect any real-world tendon behavior. This study only looked at peak tension and dorsiflexion angle without accounting for load rate, tendon strain distribution, micro movements at the subtalar, or any of the mid-tarsal joints. And Achilles loading in live humans is influenced by the entire kinetic chain, right? The hip, the knee, the foot. That model they used only isolates the ankle, and it only isolated it artificially. Plus, other larger studies in actual alive humans showed really the complete opposite, that high tops have little to zero meaningful effect on Achilles tension, function, or just injury prevention in general. Remember, I just said that your ankle's got 2 to 3 times your body weight going through it during running. The Achilles tendon transmits 5 to 10 times your body weight just during normal running. And remember, the Achilles stretches and contracts axially, meaning it stays still. The force moves up and down it. So the collar of your shoe has zero restriction on it. Your collar goes from bottom to top of the shoe, the same plane as the Achilles. It doesn't intersect it or anything. So the height has literally no bearing on its function. But once again, it is the midsole and the heel counter itself that determine the shoe's rupture risk profile. And honestly, it's your body that determines it more than anything. How limber you are, the compliance of the tendon, fatigue, footwork technique, all that is so much more important. If it wasn't, and it was all the shoes, you'd see 70% of the NBA, the WNBA, the NCAA, and 100% basically, of the ATP and WTA players getting Achilles ruptures. Now, it doesn't mean they can't cause irritation for some people, but we will get to that later because that is a completely separate thing from rupture risk. All right, myth number 3. Lows are lighter and more agile than mids and highs. And this one I threw in just because I think it's so deceiving these days how much a shoe weighs and how much the perceived weight of a shoe. It can be really mismatched. I found a lot of times mids and highs actually can feel lighter because the high collar just gives more points of contact, right? And so it's like you're just lugging the weight with a larger surface area. But remember, it's the midsole and outsole that is determining the most weight of the shoe. That's where the most weight of the shoe is gonna be. So a lot of times a low is gonna feel more bottom heavy than a mid or a high just because more of the weight is further down, so you're perceiving the weight more, even if they're of equal weight. And with the different materials that are coming in shoes nowadays, a lot of highs are becoming, mids are becoming very light. And there's also a lot of lows out there that are feather light too. So like I said, you just gotta look at the actual material in the shoe, not just the profile, because some are deceiving. All right, number 4, low tops increase your risk of ankle sprains. All right, so here's some more numbers. Ankle sprains happen in 50 milliseconds. Muscle reaction time is 60 to 90 milliseconds. I've said this so many times, but it bears repeating. By the time you see the ankle roll and the ankle actually engages the material around your shoe, the injury has already happened. The overt roll that you see after an ankle sprain is a result of the ligament injury, not the cause. And the shoe upper, specifically the ankle collar, doesn't interact with that rolling ankle until well after the injury has occurred. So remember, it's the shape and structure of the midsole and the effectiveness of the lateral flange that make a shoe good or not for ankle sprainers. But the most effective thing that you can do is proprioceptive exercises. Your body is by far its own best defense against ankle sprains. And right after that is some sort of ankle brace with some sort of plastic stirrup. But as Steph Curry has proven time and time again, even those aren't foolproof. All right, number 5, this one honestly is more nuanced than it sounds, but it's that lows in general are more comfortable than mids and highs. And like I said, this is one I didn't really understand, but I just hear it time and time again. Just people, for some reason, they just say, is in general, I like lows more than highs, more comfortable. To a large extent, comfort is just subjective, right? It's athlete dependent. But remember, lows, depending on the cut, can really rub some places in your feet and ankles the wrong way. So specifically where I'm talking about is in the front of the ankle. On lows, this can get really irritated because of where the lace line ends versus like a mid or a high, which ends in just a more gentle area of your high ankle. The other place you can rub raw is right here in the back of your heel. If you have a bony bump back there already, or if it's just a bit more prominent, the edge of that low top can cause a lot of irritation. It isn't gonna cause a rupture or anything, but it can be enough to aggravate a bursa, cause bursitis, or just give you general skin irritation. So like I said, always just make sure you match the shoe to your body and your foot's shape, not the other way around. And there are so many half-baked theories out there in terms of footwear and biomechanics and things like that, and just rumors and some guy said at some point this just become fact out there. That's the power of the internet. Thing is, if you want to find the best footwear for you and get the best tool for your specific needs, you gotta get as much information as possible, as much credible information as possible to make the right decision for you, because what's right for you might not be right for the next person. So if you do want to check out some of the biggest lies and myths out there about mids and highs, because there are some distinctions you probably should know if you're watching this video too, make sure you click into this video right here. I'll see you in that video.